It is the primal, aching desire for something more, not just more money or more status, but a profound, unshakable mastery over one's own destiny. Imagine a man standing on the edge of a precipice, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where the sun threatens to break through the grey. Yet his feet are bound by the heavy chains of past failures, societal expectations, and the chaotic noise of a world that demands his attention but offers no direction. He is the modern seeker, lost in a labyrinth of digital distractions and hollow promises of quick riches, feeling the sand of time slip through his fingers with terrifying speed. He knows in the deepest marrow of his bones that there is a secret language to success, a hidden frequency that the great architects of history tuned into, but for him, the signal is nothing but static. This is the starting point of our journey, a moment of profound realization, where the pain of staying the same finally begins to outweigh the fear of change. It is here, in the cold hearth of desperation, that the first sparks of an ancient, iron-willed philosophy begin to flicker. We are about to unearth 10 primordial rules, forged in the fires of ancient Rome and Greece, which serve as the definitive blueprint for manifesting not just wealth, but an empire of the soul. For centuries, these principles were the private domain of emperors like Marcus Aurelius, the strategic arsenal of advisors like Seneca, and the survival kit of slaves-turned-teachers like Epictetus. The tragedy of the contemporary life is that most people spend their entire lives trying to calm the ocean, screaming at the waves and cursing the wind, while their own ship is riddled with leaks and guided by a broken compass. They want the wealth, they crave the success, they manifest the dream in their minds, but they lack the psychological infrastructure to sustain it. They are building skyscrapers on shifting sand, wondering why the first storm of adversity brings their entire world crashing down. We live in an era where we are told we can have everything, yet we feel as though we possess nothing of true substance. We are bombarded with images of opulence and ease, yet the internal reality for most is one of constant anxiety, a relentless comparison to others, and a paralyzing fear of loss. We want success, but we are terrified of the very discipline required to achieve it. This tension creates a spiritual paralysis, a state where we are perpetually getting ready to live, but never actually living. But the Stoic knows that luck is a fickle god, and circumstances are ghosts. The true battle is not against the economy, the competition, or the haters. It is a battle against the undisciplined self. As we begin to peel back the layers of these 10 rules, you must prepare yourself for a radical shift in perception. What if everything you thought you knew about manifestation was backward? This is the great Stoic paradox, an open loop that we will begin to close as we progress. We are going to explore how a philosophy often mischaracterized as cold and emotionless is, in fact, the most vibrantly alive and powerful tool for material and spiritual expansion. But before we can reach the heights of the 10th rule, we must first descend into the foundation. We must confront the first rule of this ancient code, a rule so simple in its phrasing, but so monumental in its application that it has the power to recalibrate your entire reality in a single heartbeat. Rule number 1 is the dichotomy of control, the absolute bedrock of Stoic manifestation. It is the practice of ruthless categorization, the ability to look at the vast, swirling complexity of existence and divide it into 2 distinct piles, that which is up to us and that which is not. They worry about the weather, they obsess over what their neighbors think of them, they lose sleep over the fluctuations of the stock market, and they harbor resentment toward the decisions of politicians. They are trying to move mountains with their breath, and when the mountains stay still, they crumble in despair. This is the leak in the ship. The Stoic concentrates every ounce of their being on their own thoughts, their own intentions, and their own actions. This is the only domain where you are truly a king. Not because you are controlling it directly, but because you have become a person who is no longer its victim. You become the immovable object, and the world has no choice but to flow around you. Imagine the frustration of a businessman who has poured his life savings into a venture, only to have a global crisis derail his plans. To the average man, this is a catastrophe, a reason for bitterness and surrender. But to the Stoic in training, this is the laboratory of the soul. He recognizes that the crisis is outside his control, but his response to it is entirely his own. Instead, he asks, "What can I do now with what I have left?" This shift in focus is where wealth begins. It is the clarity of mind to see a new path when the old one is blocked. This is the first step in manifesting success. You must become indomitable. If your happiness depends on the success of your business, you are a slave to the market. If your confidence depends on the praise of others, you are a slave to their opinions. And only a free person can truly build an empire. Re-engaging with the intensity of this truth, we must ask, why are you here? The journey from scarcity to abundance is not a straight line. It is a spiral that demands you revisit your deepest fears with new eyes. We are moving toward a climax in this first part of our exploration, a realization that the rules of manifestation are not about wishing upon a star, but about forging a soul of iron. We don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. If your mind is a filter of lack, you will see lack everywhere. Consider the story of the ancient merchant who lost his entire cargo in a shipwreck. He arrived on the shores of Athens with nothing but the clothes on his back. But this man, Zeno, used the loss of his material wealth to seek the wealth of wisdom. He began to study under the great philosophers, eventually founding the Stoic school. Manifestation is not about avoiding the storm. It is about learning to use the wind of the storm to propel you toward your destination. The wealth you seek is often hidden behind the work you are avoiding and the fears you are refusing to face. We have established that the path to manifesting everything you want begins with a radical narrowing of focus. You must stop looking at the results and start looking at the source. The first two rules, the dichotomy of control and the alchemy of perception, are the pillars upon which the remaining 8 will stand. They provide the stability and the vision necessary to build a life of immense proportions. You must begin to catch yourself every time you complain, every time you blame, every time you allow an external event to dictate your internal state. You are being called to a higher level of existence, one where you no longer beg the universe for favors, but instead you command your own character with such precision that the universe has no choice but to reflect your internal order. As we prepare to transition into the next stage of this journey, where we will uncover the rules of action, the power of voluntary discomfort, and the secret of Amor Fati, I challenge you to take a moment of absolute silence. Look at the areas of your life where you feel frustrated or stuck. Ask yourself, am I trying to control the uncontrollable? This is your first call to action. Do not just listen to these words, let them disturb you. The door to your new life is not locked from the outside, it is bolted from the within. In the next part of this narrative, we will learn how to slide those bolts back, one by one, as we move from the foundation of the mind into the arena of the world. Prepare your spirit, for the rules are about to get more demanding, and the rewards are about to get infinitely greater. The weight of an unfulfilled life is a silent, crushing force that anchors the spirit to the mundane, creating a gravitational pull toward mediocrity that most souls never find the strength to break. This is where the journey of the modern seeker truly begins, not in the sunshine of easy victories, but in the suffocating darkness of the realization that everything they have chased, the status, the gold, the fleeting applause of the crowd, has been nothing more than a ghost. The ancient Stoics understood this existential dread with a clarity that borders on the divine, recognizing that the hunger for manifestation is not merely a desire for more things, but a desperate, visceral cry for a transformation of the self. They knew that the bridge between a life of quiet desperation and a life of indomitable success is paved with the brutal, beautiful application of internal discipline. If the first steps of this path were about grounding the mind, this next phase is about the incineration of the ego and the birth of a psychological fortress so unassailable that wealth and success have no choice but to gravitate toward its center. There is a secret rhythm to the universe that the distracted mind can never hope to hear, a frequency of abundance that only resonates when the noise of the external world is silenced by the roar of internal sovereignty. Consider the man who stands in the center of a storm, his cloak tattered by the winds of fortune, his feet bleeding from the jagged stones of circumstance, yet his eyes remain fixed on a horizon that only he can see. This is the Stoic archetype of the unconquered soul, the individual who realizes that the external world is a mirror, reflecting not what we want, but what we are. The tragedy of the common struggle for success lies in the frantic attempt to polish the mirror while the face remains dirty. To manifest the life of a titan, one must first cultivate the interiority of a god, developing a relationship with reality that is no longer transactional, but foundational. The tension builds in the space between who you are and who you must become, a gap that can only be closed by the relentless application of rules that seem, at first glance, to be about deprivation, but are in truth about the ultimate liberation of the human will. As we dive deeper into the alchemy of Stoic manifestation, we encounter the terrifying and transformative rule of radical perception, a concept that demands the seeker view every obstacle not as a barrier, but as the very fuel for their ascent. Imagine a fire that does not merely survive a deluge, but feeds upon the water itself, growing hotter and more brilliant with every attempt to extinguish it. This is the level of psychological resilience required to command the forces of wealth. They understand that the perception of bad is an optional overlay, a narrative we weave into the raw fabric of reality. By stripping away the judgment and seeing the event for what it is, a neutral occurrence, the seeker gains a strategic advantage that the emotional masses can never comprehend. This is not apathy. It is the highest form of engagement, a manifestation of power that stems from the realization that nothing external can touch the core of one's being unless permission is granted. But the path becomes steeper as we explore the necessity of voluntary discomfort, a rule that separates the pretenders from the masters. The modern world is a soft cradle designed to lull the ambition into a deep, lethargic sleep. The Stoic laughs at this deception. They know that a mind softened by luxury is a mind that can be easily broken by the slightest tremor of fate. They practice poverty in the midst of plenty, not out of masochism, but as a form of spiritual insurance. By intentionally placing themselves in situations of hardship, sleeping on the floor when a soft bed is available, fasting when the larder is full, or working in the cold when the hearth is warm, they drain the power of fear. When you have proven to yourself that you can thrive on nothing, you become an unstoppable force in the pursuit of everything. You realize that your happiness is not a hostage to your bank account or your social standing. The conflict deepens when we realize that our greatest enemy is not the competitor in the marketplace, but the other within us, the part of the psyche that craves validation and fears the judgment of the anonymous crowd. This internal civil war is where most dreams go to die, sacrificed on the altar of social conformity. The Stoic rule of social indifference is a sharp blade that cuts through the noise of public opinion, allowing the seeker to focus entirely on the excellence of their own actions. The Stoic rejects the performance. They understand that to be truly wealthy is to be indifferent to the perception of wealth. This creates an open loop in the minds of others, a mystery that draws curiosity and influence. By withdrawing their emotional investment from the approval of others, they reclaim a vast reservoir of mental power that can be redirected toward the manifestation of their vision. The air in this philosophical inquiry is thinning, and the stakes are rising. We are no longer talking about simple life hacks or productivity tips. There is a reason why so many who achieve sudden wealth find themselves more miserable than when they were poor. They lacked the Stoic framework to contain the energy of their own success. They are like children given the keys to a nuclear reactor. This leads us to the rule of the dichotomy of control applied to the very mechanics of ambition. The seeker learns to detach their internal peace from the outcome of their endeavors. This is the ultimate peak of psychological performance, to be fully committed to the process while remaining entirely unattached to the prize. When you stop obsessing over the finish line, your stride becomes longer, your breath more rhythmic, and you find yourself crossing it while others are still tripping over their own anxieties. The average person is a slave to their hopes and fears, their judgment clouded by the potential for gain or the threat of loss. They are reactive, their moves dictated by the pressure of the moment. Because they have already premeditated the worst-case scenario and found themselves at peace with it, they have nothing to lose. This lack of desperation is the ultimate leverage. They can wait longer, think clearer, and act more decisively. The manifestation of wealth is often just the byproduct of being the most rational person in the room. You must become a person who is so complete in their own virtue that external success is merely an ornament, a beautiful but unnecessary addition to an already perfect structure. This is the point where the loops begin to close, where the disparate threads of discipline, perception, and indifference weave into a tapestry of undeniable power. You want it because it is the natural expression of your excellence. You want it because wealth is a form of energy that, in the hands of the virtuous, can be a force for profound global transformation. Every time you choose logic over emotion, every time you choose long-term purpose over short-term pleasure, you are placing a brick in the foundation of your future empire. The climax of this internal revolution is the moment you realize that you have already manifested your success, because your mind is already that of a master. But this is not the end. It is merely the completion of the second phase. The seeker has learned to endure, to perceive, and to detach, but they have yet to master the final transmutation, the ability to turn the leaden reality of existence into the gold of a destiny fulfilled. This requires a deeper dive into the concept of Amor Fati, the love of fate, not as a passive acceptance, but as an aggressive embrace of everything that happens. It is the realization that the very things that seem to be destroying you are the very things that are creating you. The pain is not an obstacle. The pain is the way. To truly manifest everything you want, you must reach a state of being where you want exactly what is happening, while simultaneously working with every fiber of your being to shape the future. It is a state of constant dynamic tension that produces a level of energy and focus that is almost supernatural. As we conclude this intensive exploration of the mid-path, the call to action is clear and demanding. Do not wait for the perfect conditions to manifest your dreams. The conditions are never perfect. Instead, manifest the perfect mind to deal with the imperfect world. Look at your obstacles and say, "Thank you for this opportunity to be great." Strip away the unnecessary luxuries that have made you weak and rediscover the raw, unyielding power of your own will. The kingdom you seek is not over the horizon. It is within the fortress of your own disciplined mind. The next level awaits, where the secrets of time, legacy, and the final surrender of the ego will be revealed. Stay focused, stay disciplined, and remember that the world belongs to those who have first conquered themselves. Imagine a man standing amidst the ruins of what he once called his greatest achievement, watching the smoke rise from the embers of his ambition, yet his face remains as still as a mountain lake at dawn. This is the point where most individuals crumble, where the weight of expectations turns into the leaden shackles of despair. But for the one who has begun to master the Stoic arts, this is not the end. It is the crucible. We find ourselves now deep within the labyrinth of the soul, moving past the initial stages of mere discipline and entering the sacred space where manifestation is no longer a wish, but a mathematical certainty born of internal alignment. The world perceives wealth as a collection of zeros in a digital ledger or the physical weight of gold. But the Stoic knows that these are merely the shadows cast by a much larger, much more luminous reality. To reach the heights of success that others only dream of, one must first descend into the depths of their own character, confronting the shadows that whisper of lack, fear, and inadequacy. This is the moment where the journey intensifies, where the air grows thin and the path becomes narrow, demanding a level of emotional and spiritual precision that few are willing to cultivate. This is where the true power resides, hidden behind the veils of adversity and the illusions of the material world, waiting for the seeker to prove their worthiness through a radical reorientation of their very existence. The transition from mere survival to absolute mastery begins with the profound embrace of Amor Fati, the love of one's fate. It is one thing to tolerate the storms of life, to grit one's teeth and wait for the rain to stop. But it is an entirely different level of spiritual alchemy to actually love the storm itself. When a man learns to love his fate, he ceases to be a victim of circumstance and becomes the architect of his own destiny. He looks at the betrayal of a partner, the loss of a fortune, or the physical toll of exhaustion and says, "Yes, this is exactly what I needed." This is not a passive acceptance. It is a fiery, passionate affirmation of the present moment. It is the realization that the universe is not happening to you, but for you. In this state of radical love for what is, the resistance that normally drains our energy vanishes. Think of the immense energy wasted in complaining, in wishing things were different, in mourning the past or fearing the future. When Amor Fati is realized, all that wasted energy is reclaimed and channeled into the manifestation of one's highest purpose. He becomes a magnet for opportunity because he is no longer at war with the world. He is in a state of constant, ecstatic cooperation with the unfolding of time. This leads us into the darker, more protective corridors of the mind, where we encounter the practice of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Most people spend their lives in a state of fragile optimism, terrified that their bubble of comfort might pop. They manifest from a place of desperation, hoping against hope that nothing goes wrong. They must sit in the silence of their own heart and vividly imagine the loss of everything they hold dear. They must feel the cold of poverty, the sting of loneliness, and the weight of illness. When you have already faced the worst-case scenario and found your inner light still burning, what is there left to fear? This psychological fortress allows the seeker to take the bold risks necessary for massive success. They do not cling to their riches, and ironically, it is this lack of clinging that allows wealth to flow toward them in abundance. They become like a vessel that is always open, never overflowing with greed, but never empty of purpose. This is where the concept of the obstacle being the way takes its most visceral form. Most individuals see an obstacle as a signal to turn back or a reason to lament their luck. In the emotional landscape of the Stoic, the obstacle is not something to be overcome, it is something to be utilized. Every difficulty is a piece of raw material, a block of marble waiting for the sculptor's chisel. If you are met with public ridicule, that ridicule is the fire that tempers the steel of your self-worth. The emotional weight of this realization is staggering. You begin to look for friction, for resistance, for the very things that make others quit, because you know that within that friction lies the energy of transformation. This is how empires are built. Not by avoiding the storm, but by learning to sail using the wind of the storm itself. Yet there is a deeper layer of discipline required to sustain this level of manifestation, one that demands a voluntary descent into discomfort. This is Rule 8, the practice of voluntary hardship. They understand that the soul grows soft in the lap of luxury, and a soft soul cannot hold the weight of true greatness. To manifest everything you want, you must first prove that you do not need it. You must be able to sleep on the hard floor when a soft bed is available. This is not about self-punishment. It is about self-mastery. When you voluntarily embrace discomfort, you are telling your subconscious mind that your happiness is not contingent on external circumstances. This creates a state of psychological invincibility. The seeker who can be happy with nothing is the only one who can truly be trusted with everything. This paradox is the heart of Stoic manifestation. Consider the emotional toll of this path. It is a lonely road, often misunderstood by those who see only the external results. They will not see the nights spent staring into the abyss of your own fears. They will not see the moments where you chose to stay in the fire, when every instinct screamed for you to run. Each trial is a question asked by the universe, and your response is the answer that determines your reality. You are constantly in a state of becoming a perpetual motion machine of growth and refinement. You must feel this pressure, you must embrace it, and you must allow it to crack the shell of your ego until the light of your true nature shines through. But we must pause and re-engage with the core of this transformation. Why the hunger for wealth? The thirst for success? If it is to fill a hole within yourself, you will find that no amount of gold can suffice. You are already whole, already complete, already a fragment of the divine intelligence that governs the cosmos. The manifestation of your desires is not a process of getting what you don't have, but of revealing what you already are. This is the great revelation. The world is a mirror. If you see lack, it is because you feel lack. The Stoic rules are not a set of instructions for changing the world. They are a set of instructions for changing the observer of the world. And when the observer changes, the world has no choice but to follow. You have embraced your fate. You have faced your fears. You have turned obstacles into paths, and you have hardened your spirit through voluntary hardship. You are now standing on the precipice of a new reality. You can feel the shift in the way people react to you, in the way opportunities seem to fall into your lap, and in the way the very fabric of reality seems to bend to your will. This is the climax of the internal work, the moment where the internal alignment becomes so strong that the external manifestation becomes inevitable. The water has been building for a long time, held back by the walls of your own limitations. But now, those walls have been dismantled piece by piece, rule by rule. But do not be deceived into thinking the work is over. We have reached a high plateau, but there are still peaks to climb. They are the ones that tie all the others together, the ones that transform a successful man into a legendary one. You have seen the power of discipline and perspective, but you have yet to see the power of total integration, where the self and the universe become one single harmonious movement of manifestation. This is the payoff of your persistence, the reward for your courage to look within. You are no longer just a student of philosophy, you are becoming a living embodiment of the truth. Feel the weight of the responsibility and the lightness of the freedom it brings. You are the master of your soul and the captain of your fate. You must take what you have learned here and apply it with a ruthlessness that borders on the divine. Do not let these words merely wash over you like a passing rain. Let them sink into the very marrow of your bones. This is your moment of choice. Will you remain as you were, or will you step into the fire of transformation and emerge as something entirely new? Proceed now to the final integration, for the end of this journey is only the beginning of your true power. Your task is to meditate on the concept of Amor Fati until it becomes your default response to every event in your life, transforming every setback into a stepping stone toward your ultimate evolution. The final threshold stands before the seeker, not as a wall of stone, but as a mirror of terrifying clarity, reflecting the culmination of every trial, every mental discipline, and every silent battle fought in the corridors of the mind. This is the moment where the philosophy of the ancient porches ceases to be a collection of dusty maxims and becomes a living, breathing force of nature, capable of bending the very fabric of reality toward the seeker's will. Most people wander through their lives as ghosts in their own stories, haunted by the specters of what might have been, paralyzed by the fear of loss, and blinded by the glittering distractions of a world that thrives on their dissatisfaction. But for the one who has mastered the first 7 rules of this Stoic ascension, the atmosphere begins to thin, the air becomes electric with the scent of imminent transformation, and the realization dawns that the power to manifest wealth, influence, and success was never about the external world at all, but about the absolute sovereignty of the internal empire. The journey has been long, and the weight of the previous lessons, the mastery of perception, the discipline of action, the endurance of the will, has forged a soul that is no longer brittle, but tempered like the finest steel in the fires of adversity. Yet there is a lingering tension, a final knot of resistance that prevents the ultimate manifestation from taking hold. A subtle fear that perhaps, despite all the inner work, the universe remains indifferent to the hunger of the human heart. This conflict is the final barrier between the person who merely studies Stoicism and the person who embodies it as a living god of their own destiny. It is the agonizing gap between knowing the path and walking it, when the path leads through the very heart of one's deepest insecurities. To shatter this final resistance, we must embrace the 8th rule of this manifestation framework, a concept so profound that it turns the very notion of suffering on its head. Amor Fati, the unconditional love of one's fate. This is not merely the passive acceptance of what happens, nor is it a begrudging tolerance of hardship. It is a passionate, fiery embrace of every single event, every obstacle, every betrayal, and every triumph, as if it were exactly what the seeker had wished for. The seeker realizes that if they are to manifest a life of unparalleled success, they cannot be at war with the reality that produces that success. They understand that the setbacks which once felt like curses are, in fact, the raw materials of their greatness. They realize that the universe is not happening to them, but for them. And in this radical shift of perspective, the energy that was once wasted on resentment is channeled into a singular, unstoppable force of manifestation. By loving their fate, they become immune to the stings of fortune. And in that immunity, they find the clarity to see opportunities that others miss because they are too busy complaining. But as the seeker begins to vibrate with this new frequency of total acceptance, they encounter the 9th rule, the one that provides the terrifying urgency required to turn dreams into concrete reality, Memento Mori. They must carry the constant, vivid awareness of their own mortality not as a source of depression, but as the ultimate catalyst for action. The Stoic understands that the clock is not merely ticking, it is devouring the only currency that truly matters: time. It removes the fear of social judgment, the hesitation to take calculated risks, and the tendency to procrastinate on the grand visions of their soul. If death could arrive this very evening, how would one spend the next hour? Would they hesitate to lead their industry with an innovative idea? No. It compels the seeker to manifest their wealth and success now, in the present moment, because the future is a hallucination. Memento Mori transforms the seeker into a predator of the present, extracting every ounce of value, every connection, and every bit of growth from the current second, creating a momentum of success that is impossible to halt. This brings us to the midpoint of this final ascension, where the seeker must confront the paradoxical nature of their pursuit. Why does the soul crave these external markers of success if the Stoic philosophy teaches that virtue is the only good? You do not chase the shadow, you become the sun that casts it. The manifestation of everything you want is the secondary effect of becoming the person who is capable of holding it without being corrupted by it. But if you seek excellence, the wealth will follow as a matter of universal law, because the world is a mirror that reflects the quality of your character back to you in the form of material outcomes. The 10th and final rule, the climax of this entire philosophical architecture, is the law of integrated sovereignty. This is the great revelation where all loops are closed and the seeker realizes that the barrier between the internal and the external was a functional illusion. They manifest everything they want because they have aligned their desires with the natural order of the universe. And in doing so, the universe begins to move in concert with them. The great reveal is this: the Stoic does not manifest wealth by wishing for it, but by becoming so valuable, so disciplined, and so unshakable that the world has no choice but to reward them. They have mastered the art of the preferred indifferent, where they can enjoy the finest wines, the most expansive estates, and the highest honors, while remaining completely ready to walk away from it all without a moment's hesitation. This detachment is the ultimate power move. It makes them unbuyable, unbreakable, and therefore incredibly attractive to the forces of fortune. As we reach the final payoff, the seeker sees the complete picture. The manifestation of success is the result of a mind that is no longer divided against itself. The conflict between wanting and having is resolved because the Stoic already has everything in their mind before it ever appears in their bank account. The climax is the quiet, profound realization that you are already the master of the world you seek to conquer. The wealth you desired is now flowing toward you, not because you are begging for it, but because you are the most stable and productive vessel for it to inhabit. The conclusion is not an ending, but a new beginning on a higher plane of existence. The seeker stands at the summit, looking down at the landscape of their life, and realizes that the struggle was the point. In their place is a sovereign individual, a person of depth, power, and unassailable peace. The success and wealth that once seemed like distant stars are now the ground upon which you walk. You have turned the lead of your common existence into the gold of a legendary life. The final payoff is the absolute freedom that comes from knowing that no matter what the world gives or takes, you are the master of your fate and the captain of your soul. This is the call to action that echoes through the halls of history, from the journals of Marcus Aurelius to the modern arenas of high-stakes commerce and global influence. Do not merely listen to these words, breathe them into your marrow. When you encounter resistance, smile, for it is the friction that generates the heat of your transformation. When you face loss, rejoice, for it is the pruning that allows for greater growth. Start this very second. Reread your own life through the lens of these 10 rules. The world is waiting for the version of you that refuses to be broken. Step into your power, claim your wealth, and live the life that your Stoic ancestors knew was possible. Begin now.